this for the last few years. If we can go back in time a few years initially, just to kind of see the sequence of thought and methodology that we're trying to essentially find out what actually happened. So it became clear initially in the first few years of research that the Muhammad of the traditions didn't exist. I did make attempts to look at sources. There were some sources seemed to refer to Muhammad, but there was a lot of contradiction with the dates. It didn't quite fit. And then we kind of threw out the idea of Muhammad, but the sources still seem to suggest that there was some sort of figure. We tried looking at different possibilities. Uber seemed to suggest himself as being a Muhammad, but then we saw that Jewish inscription from 523 AD, reference to Muhammad. Now we took the least controversial interpretation, that it's just referring to God there as the highly praised. But what if it is actually a direct messianic reference to Muhammad way back in 523? Would that make any sense? Now, the issue of the hadiths and so forth, and the description, as Lou referred to like a pervert, rapey type of Muhammad, I think that's an issue in terms of what was going on centuries later when they're looking back on the early story of Muhammad. I think that's not going to be something we're going to be able to resolve until we get this early part correct. I think this is going to explain quite a bit. The good thing about all of this is that we can fit some of the characters from the Islamic tradition with what we can find historically, and this is always really useful. Okay, so let's go a little bit more into it. Marzutra II, the crucified exilarch. Now, I don't know if I've seen this before, and it didn't really hit me, but today, looking into it, it really kind of struck me that there was a crucified exilarch. Imagine the significance of that for Jewish people. Now, I'm going to refer to two references from Wikipedia, which have errors in it, just to point out the fact that they have errors in it, but at the same time drawing out what's accurate. Marzutra II became exilarch of the Jewish community in Babylon at the age of 15 in 483 AD. The date there is wrong, as we'll see later, or at least seems to be. 12 years before the revolt being against the Sasanians. After King Kavda I denied Jews the right to organize their own militia, Marzutra took advantage of the confusion in which Mazdak's communist attempts plunged Persia and led a successful military revolt that achieved political independence for the Jews of Mahosa. Mahosa being the capital of Persia, which is on the river Tigris. Okay, there's actually two cities across the river from each other, pair cities. Okay, the other one being Seleucia, if I remember correctly. Another entry here, again, there being the date, says the Jewish state lasted 7 years until 502 AD. When Kapta finally defeated Marzutra and punished him with crucifixion on the bridge of Mahosa. Now, this is the stuff that could lead to a huge rethink in the community. You know, if you have something dramatic like that, we only have to think 500 years before to the time of Jesus and what effect a crucifixion had there. So bear that in mind. So we have this Jewish paper which gives a different dating. It says that he was actually born in 493 and he was exilarch from 508 to 520 AD. This rings true for me, as we'll see in a moment. I think this is a more correct dating. Obviously, this is still provisional. We'll obviously double check and we'll try and figure out which dating is correct or more correct. It looks like this is the date that is correct for Marzutra, especially considering these are two Jewish scholars. I don't think they would get the dating wrong for their exilarchs, unlike a Wikipedia entry. Okay, so let's put this into context. Okay, so this is a family tree of the Marzutras, who had a huge influence in that time, and they were amongst a large number of exilarchs. Okay, so Marzutra II there, 508 to 520, and you can see that he was the 30th exilarch, followed by Hune, and then by Hophne, which is the 32nd, followed by Hanine, the 33rd, who was the brother of Husiel, who's the 35th, and so forth. It's a bit of a spider's web there, but we're going to be coming back to this regularly. But these are key people. I'd also draw your attention to Nehemiah II, the 36th exilarch. He was the person who conquered Jerusalem in 614, and eventually he lost Jerusalem. Okay, his brother Hanamel, sometimes referred to as Shalom, is proposed here as Salman al-Farsi. Okay, 37th exilarch. You see that all these are very clearly Jewish. Right. So the key thing that here also is there's a dating initially as 518, and it was actually a linguist who gave me this dating who also helped out A.J. Jukes with his paper. He also gave the dating of 518 AD. It was subsequently found that the calculation was wrong. It was actually 523. So I'm essentially going to re-give this section from A.J. Juice with the corrections in place, okay, because it actually means that what A.J. Juice was saying here is even more valid when we put in the corrected dating. So this is it here. I've highlighted the only changes I've made to the text just to be clear. A century earlier, we have a Sabaic inscription from Bir Hema, the Jewish Hemeritic text from 523 AD that praises Muhammed. It was created by Yosef du Nuwas, a Jewish king who brought a mix between rabbinic and Levite Sadducee customs to Emir. What is generally overlooked is that he belongs to a messianic pair. At its greatest extent, his kingdom encompassed almost the entire Arab peninsula. Just north, Marzutra II had declared independence from the Sasanian Empire. He is the Muhammad that is the praised on Nuwas inscription 3 years after Marzutra's crucifixion on the bridge at Mahose. So what A.J. Juice is saying that this inscription is actually commemorating essentially the crucifixion of Marzutra, which would make sense because we now have the correct dating, which is 523, and he was crucified in 520. It makes more sense than the earlier suggested dating of 518. Oh, this makes sense. So you can imagine this then being a Muhammad inscription rather than just simply a reference to God as highly praised. Okay, so this is the inscription. Now, if you see the large crack on the left-hand side, the vertical one, the word Muhammad is there in Sabaic writing. Okay, and this is it transliterated with the translation given to us by the Lord used by the highly praised. Now we could probably just say that this is, if we follow A.J. Juice's line of thinking, that this could be simply translated as by the Lord of Jews by Muhammad. Okay. Now, what we're saying here is A.J. Juice offers it as a direct reference to a messianic figure, Muhammad. In light of this occurrence, the Jewish inscription might well be referring to a Jewish exarch as the Muhammed. What is extraordinary is that it would unusually be a crucified Muhammad. Now, his messianic successors are the progenitors of the chain of Muhammads. So this is again from A.J. Juice's paper. His messianic successors are the progenitors of the chain of Muhammads on the path to Islam, including the Marzutran Nehemiah been Huziel, the leader who failed to hold on to the Temple Mount in 617 AD, and his brother Salman. Okay, so you can see there on top, this is the original Muhammed or Zutra II, okay, 13th Exarch, and then we have Nehemiah and his brother uh, Shalom or Salman al-Farsi, who are both exarchs, one after the other. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now, so we now have three Muhammads so far. There's going to be a lot more, as we'll see. He goes on to say, Salman al-Farisi, yes, it reads Pharisee, had two Marzutran sons, Yaakov and Exarch Iman. Yaakov, Kab al-Akbar, went to the Academy of Pompedita, Baghdad. He is Abu Bakr, Jacob in the Doctrina Jacobi. So this is quite a surprise to me because I dismissed this. Abu Bakr, couldn't find him in history. Okay, but this is a coded name. So you have Jacob, this Jacob obviously, who's Abu Bakr. Now it's interesting actually if you look at the word Bakr and you read it backwards, you can see Cab. Could that be like, as in Jacob, Cab? Is there a play around with the sound there? I'm not sure how he came to the conclusion Abu Bakr, but in any case, that's what he proposes as the real Abu Bakr of history. Okay, he was a claimant. The dating doesn't fit in with the standard Islamic narrative there. That would be the one question mark, but then we're not expecting it to fall in place as neatly as that. Okay, so this is Jacob, another Macbeth in the family tree of the Exarchs. Okay, and he goes on to say, in which Salman al-Farisi is Tanuma from Nawa and therefore Uthman. So he proposes that Shalom or Salman al-Farsi is actually who Uthman is. Okay. Again, it wouldn't fit with the standard Islamic narratives chronology or anything like that. But that is the proposal there. As I say, this is AJG's paper, and I'm just giving you the ideas. I'm still open to the possibility that this may or may not be correct. It is experimental, but could be onto something here. He goes on to say Salman's firstborn Iman was the Messiah of Pompedita, Abdullah ibn Saba, the builder of the first permanent mosque, Masjid as-Salman, on the Temple Mount at the side of Umar. Now, interestingly, Shalom His proposes Salman al-Farsi, and his son builds a mosque referred to as Masjid al-Salman, as in Salman al-Farsi, so it kind of fits in with that. Okay. He is also Abdul Allah ibn al-Zubair Muhammad. Okay. So we have a lot of overlapping people here, or names for the same person, as it were. Okay. He is Sabaiya and Karaite founder, also the first of the Hulat Rosh Hagolah, the Marzutran Exarch. Okay. AGG says it is easy to understand, and I say it in plain English without further elaboration. The Marzutra lineage carries the title of Muhammad in Proto-Islam. Okay? So the Marzutran lineage is key to the title of Muhammad. They're the ones that carry it. Marzuta II was Muhammad. Therefore, Nehemiah bin Uziel was Muhammad. Therefore, his brother Salman al-Farisi was Muhammad. And Salman al-Farisi, the brother of Nehemiah, carries another title, al-Muhammadi. Therefore, the Sabaiya Abdul Allah ibn al-Zubair was Muhammad as well. Now, he goes on elsewhere in the paper to say that the messenger al-Hajjaj essentially brags about his higher status in faith and commands to advance against the queen. You'll remember that al-Hajjaj is thought of as one of the writers of the Quran, so this might be significant. Most of the successive speech is uttered by the messenger al-Hajjaj. Resolving the confusion about Muhammad al-Hajjaj, who advances against Queen Saba that are proposed to be another Muhammad, is not as difficult as it may seem. As I said, the Muhammad comes down with the Marzutras. Nehemiah bin Uziel's father had a brother through whom a secondary Marzutran branch is formed through Bostone, the first exarch under Arab rule. Now, there's the exarchs under Arab rule have a different sequence of exarchs, exarch 1, 2, 3, and so forth. This kind of makes it a bit confusing. Now, I'll show you the family tree in a moment just to make this clearer. It goes on to say, through this branch we have the exarch Isday the second, or Hasday, or Isday spelled differently, which comes from Hasadia, Hebrew, and who says this is al-Hajjaj. Okay, so let's have a look. So down there in the corner, Isday the second, fourth exarch. Look at the time frame, 700 to 730 AD. It fits in with al-Hajjaj. So he proposes that this is another of the Muhammads. Now, if you notice that this is a Bostone branch, so if you look up above, you'll see the word Bostone, the first exarch, and it makes its way down to that chain as well. Okay. Now, there's a problem. For this, we need to know that Boston was confirmed as the exarch over all Gaons by the non-existent Caliph Ali. Dara, or Asdad War, the first Persian emperor Yazdegerd's daughter, was given by the Caliph to Boston as a wife. Let's go back a second. So if you see there, see where Boston is, and you can see that he was married to Dara, who's the daughter of Yazdegerd III, king of Persia. Okay, very significant. What's the problem there? Well, Boston being Jewish, marrying into the Persians, his children are now going to be deemed unclean and not fit to be an exarch. So there's the problem. Okay. So it goes on to say, despite the royal Sasanian blood, that marriage made the Boston family unclean, half Jews, and therefore unfit for the exarchy. The problem is that the phantom Imam Hussein ibn Ali also married a daughter by Yazdegerd Banu. They bore an Ali. So do you see how the standard Islamic narrative is sort of half echoing the historical story? There was a problem that I could not resolve in the Doctrina Jacobi. There, things were being moved by Asmictos, an obvious ally of the group pushed down in Carthage. From context and patterns, there is a good probability that Ashmictos refers to Boston for Ashmictos, meaning the unclean. Okay, so this seems to be a coded reference to the Boston there as the unclean, Boston as the exarch, and Salman al-Farsi as Muhammad is not the way it is biblically prescribed. Both offices are supposed to come from clean Davidic and Sadducean lineages, while Salman al-Farsi is a Davidic Sadducean composite. Boston's offspring is unclean in Jewish eyes. There lies a problem. So, in summary, there were a chain of Muhammads, according to A.J. Jukes, that included Arzuta II, 30th exarch, who was crucified, Nehemiah II, the 36th, who conquered Jerusalem in 614, and then Hanamel Shalom, Salman al-Farsi, who's the 37th exarch, Jacob of Syria, Eman the First, 38th exarch, and Histi II, who is proposed as Al-Hajjaj, the 4th exarch. So all very significant people. Now, so I'm just going to have a look at your comments. So I'll just go back a bit here. Hello from Montenegro, Dawn Ritchie from Ennis Clare. Hello Connor. hello to Dragon. Always great to see you there. Yeah, so Muhammed was potentially a Jewish ex-Lark. And this, this here. So there is Salman al-Farsi given a shrine. It would be amazing if that shrine was originally to an ex-Lark. Who knows? It's, and we don't even know if that shrine is actually contains any bones. You know, it's all very muddy. Hello to Austin. And I imagine telling Muslims there wasn't a Muhammad, but Muhammad's. I know it's a really messy history to try and get to the bottom. And also imagine telling Muslims Muhammad was Jewish. Yeah. Now, the, the thing to bear in mind, I think we have to be very careful with here, with the term Jewish. We're dealing with a time where there were an awful lot of Jewish sects with hugely different opinions, so we can't just imagine our modern day concept of what Jewish meant and say that's what they believed in. So there was